that the HTV's solar panels that are along the outside of the vehicle are receiving good power. And then HTV control over in Tsukuba, Japan, will take over the flight of the vehicle for the next few days until its rendezvous to the International Space Station this Saturday morning. Now 11 a.m. Central Time, 1 a.m. out at the pad, 5 minutes until launch. A nice pan of the vehicle, that fairing up at the top, the white fairing. Underneath is the HTV-8 vehicle and the 4 tons of cargo inside. 3,000 pounds of which is fairing underneath batteries and associated adapter plates on the pallet that will be retrieved robotically from the outside, and the rest will be cargo by the crew. This includes many experiments as well as some hardware, tools, and food. Some of the tools inside include special spacewalking tools that will be used for the alpha magnetic spectrometer repair, and to work with such a delicate piece of hardware. There's also oxygen and nitrogen tanks, some specialized hardware for the water recovery system, as well as the treadmill. Again, in the pressurized compartment of the vehicle, about 5,000 pounds of cargo. Mission Control Houston, following along from the milestones provided by the HTV control and Takasaki Range Control over at the Tanegashima Space Center that are overseeing the launch. Everything still on track for a launch just 3 minutes from now. The International Space Station, passing over the Atlantic Ocean, now crossing over into the continent of Africa, the southern border of the country of Liberia. It's on a northeastern track and will be located over Africa at the time of launch being over at the east at one of the southern islands of Japan. You can see there on this map. Everything's still on track from here in Mission Control Houston and out at the Range Control Center and HTV Control. Less than 2 minutes to launch.
Followed by the pressurization of the liquid oxygen and hydrogen systems of the second station, and they are now complete. Cooling initiates at the flame deflector.
1 minute until launch. Everything looking good so far.
打ち上げ1分前です。T-1 minute.
49 30 seconds to launch. Again, the solid rocket boosters and that core stage, the first stage containing liquid fuel, will carry the rocket through the first 1 minute 54 seconds of its launch. Everything's still on track, 10 seconds to launch. Getting a good view of the engine underneath, now igniting.
All systems are go. Main engine started. We have main engine ignition.
T0 and liftoff of the HTV-8 and the H-2B rocket carrying its way 4 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. Lighting up the night sky over southern Japan. Everything looking good through the flight so far. Those 4 strap-on solid rocket boosters will carry the vehicle through the first 1 minute 54 seconds of the launch.
Following liftoff, the operation control of the launch vehicle has been switched from the blockhouse to the range control center.
Now 1 minute into the flight. $20 more seconds before those solid rocket boosters burn out. Everything looking good so far. The vehicle itself heading towards the southeast to get in the right phasing to meet up with the International Space Station. You can see the solid rocket boosters beginning to burn out. We should see them separate in pairs coming up here in just a few seconds. There's the first pair of solid rocket boosters separating. And the second pair. Now that core stage will continue to burn until 5 minutes 47 seconds into the flight, burning liquid fuel, liquid hydrogen, and liquid oxygen. Good confirmation of booster separation, 2 minutes 47 seconds into the flight, 3 minutes left of this first stage. Three minutes 47 seconds into the flight, everything looking good so far. That first stage will continue to burn for another 2 minutes. 4 minutes, 47 seconds into the flight, 1 minute left of this stage. Everything continued to be on track throughout the flight of the HTV today and the H-2B rocket, performing nominally. Again, 5 minutes, 47 seconds into the flight will be the cutoff of that first stage. It'll enter into a 7-second coast period before the first and second stage separates. Another 7 seconds until the second stage is ignited. Everything continuing to be on track. 5 minutes, 27 seconds into the flight, 20 more seconds of the first stage burning. Switching to animation right after the burnout of that first stage. And confirmation that that first stage did successfully cut off. Second stage burning now. First and second stages separated. This second stage will burn for well over 8 minutes, 8 minutes 19 seconds. It'll be just over 15 minutes until the HTV itself is inserted into a good orbit. Coming up on 7 minutes into the flight, everything looking good so far. Eight minutes into the flight, HTV continuing on a nominal track heading towards the southeast to get into the right phasing to meet up with the International Space Station, which is just about to cross over into an orbital nighttime as it crosses over the Mediterranean Sea towards the western coast of Greece. Meanwhile, the HTV heading on a southeasterly course over the Pacific Ocean to get into a good orbit. Again, it's about 15 minutes from the time of liftoff to the time of orbital insertion, and the HTV separates from the launch vehicle. 10 minutes into the flight, that second stage continuing to burn as expected, everything on track as the HTV makes its way through its ascent milestones. There are only a few milestones left. That second stage burns for well over 8 minutes total. We're now 10 minutes into the flight. We could expect a cutoff about 14 minutes 20 seconds into the flight. It'll enter into a short coast period. That coast lasting just about 51 seconds before there's physical separation between the HTV and the second stage of the H-2B rocket. "11 minutes, 30 seconds into the flight. HTV-8 and the second stage of the vehicle performing nominally. Less than 3 minutes until the second stage cuts off and the vehicle enters a short coast period. Again, the phasing here gets it into an orbit to catch up with the ultimate destination of HTV-8, the International Space Station, where it will arrive on Saturday morning, capture scheduled for 6:15 a.m. Central Time. The International Space Station itself crossing over into an orbital nighttime now just north of the Black Sea over the southern border of Ukraine. "13 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight, everything looking good so far for that second stage. Expect a cutoff just under a minute from now. Again, after that cutoff, it'll enter into a short coast period before the physical separation between the HTV and the second stage. "14 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. Should expect a cutoff here in just a few seconds. Second stage has cut off, now just waiting for confirmation of physical separation between the HTV and the second stage. And confirmation of separation. Getting a look at HTV control over in Tsukuba, Japan. A good flight of the vehicle. Looking back at the launch pad where the H-2B rocket took off just 15 minutes ago. HTV mission control over in Tsukuba, Japan will take over the flight from here, now that the HTV has separated from the launch vehicle. There's HTV control over in Tsukuba, Japan. Just recently we saw the Launch Control Center, that's the Takasaki Range Control Center over in Tanegashima. This HTV Control Center over in Tsukuba, Japan, just northeast of Tokyo. It'll be these teams here that'll see through the flight of HTV over the next few days to rendezvous at the station early Saturday morning. Now that HTV has physically separated, just waiting for confirmation that the vehicle itself is drawing power in a good configuration after separation. And HTV mission control will take over from there. Again, you're looking at the HTV flight control room over in Tsukuba, Japan. These teams will oversee the flight of HTV on its route in low Earth orbit to catch up with the International Space Station. Again, the HTV Mission Control Center over in Tsukuba, Japan. That's just northeast of the major city of Tokyo, the center island. and receive confirmation that the HTV is in a good orbital insertion, is drawing power from those solar rays, and it's on its way to meet up with the International Space Station in just a few days. A short recap of today's activities: launching on time at 11:05 a.m. Central Time. Made a nominal ascent over 15 minutes before it was separated and entered into orbit. Teams here at the HTV Mission Control Center in Tsukuba, Japan will oversee the flight of HTV as it makes its way around the Earth, now over the South Pacific Ocean east off the coast of Australia after entering into orbit. It'll continue to orbit the Earth for the next few days until it rendezvous with the International Space Station at 6:15 a.m. scheduled time, Central Time, on Saturday, September 28th. It'll be Christina Cook at the controls of the station's robotic arm to physically grab the HTV as it makes its way to its capture position, flying in tandem with the International Space Station. And robotics controllers will take over after that to install it onto the International Space Station. Before that happens, though, there'll be 3 new crew members launching and arriving aboard the International Space Station, a total of 9 crew members aboard the space station by the time HTV arrives on Saturday. Be sure to tune in to the launch of Jessica Meir, Oleg Skripochka, and Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri tomorrow morning. We'll start our coverage at 8 a.m. Central Time for the launch at 8:57 a.m. Central. They'll be launching from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Make a 4-orbit rendezvous to dock with the International Space Station in the afternoon U.S. time. We'll start our coverage then at 2 p.m., looking for a 2:45 p.m. docking. And then we'll start the welcome ceremony and hatch opening at 4 p.m. Central Time, where the 3 crew members aboard the Soyuz MS-15 will be greeted by the 6 crew members currently part of Expedition 60. After you tune into that coverage, make sure you see the completion of HTV's arrival to the International Space Station. We'll start our coverage just before 5 a.m. Central Time, again looking at a capture time at 6:15 a.m. A great insertion of HTV into orbit. Again, teams in HTV's Mission Control Center in Tsukuba will take over from here, working closely with the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston, Texas, where HTV will eventually join its ultimate destination, the International Space Station. Until then, this is Mission Control Houston.